Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello there. My name is Salim Javed and I'm an assistant professor at the Faculty of Mass Communication and Media Technology at SGT University. We are producing a series of videos which will help you understand some of the basic concepts and facts about mass communication. If you remember, in the last video we talked about the history of photography, and in this video, which is the third video in the series, we will be learning about the history of cinema. Some may call it film, some call it movies, but whatever the name is, cinema, film or movie, they are the spokes of the same wheel. So, let's get started with the history of cinema. Now, if you remember, when we were talking about the history of photography, we talked about Edward Mybridge and how he was hired by Governor of California, Leland Stanford, to come and prove his point, because there was a bet that when a horse is galloping, all the four legs are there in the air. So Leland Stanford hired Edward Mybridge and he kept on experimenting. And in the summer of 1877, he basically set up 12 electrically operated cameras along with the Sacramento racetrack and stretching wire across it, which would basically trip the camera shutter. Edward Mybridge subsequently discovered that by mounting glass plate photograph of a galloping horse on an enlarged phenakistoscope, on which later on Edward Mybridge fashioned his zoopraxiscope, a device with the counter-rotating disc that projected the images successively and sequentially with the help of magic lantern on a screen. He could prove, produce and show the live action as it actually and simultaneously was happening. Edward Mybridge basically succeeded in producing and projecting a series of images which basically proved via an image that all the four legs of a horse were there in the air. But he was not the man who actually invented the moving pictures. Now, there was another French physiologist, his name was Etienne Jules Murray, who basically recorded the first series photographs of live action in a single camera, which was, as it happened, the camera was also portable. He, as being a specialist in animal locomotion, basically invented something called conophotographic gun. Why it is called a conophotographic gun? Because it looked like a rifle. Actually, so in 1882, in order to take a series of picture of birds' flight, Etienne Jules Murray basically made this chronophotographic gun, which took 12 simultaneous photographs of a movement per second and imprinted them on a rotating glass plate. Almost a year later, Murray basically switched from this cumbersome glass plate to paper roll film, which had the effect of introducing film strip to cinematography. Now, the next big step which was taken by someone, his name was Hannibal Goodwin. Now, Hannibal Goodwin was basically Episcopalian minister. Hannibal Goodwin first used celluloid roll film as a base for light sensitive emulsion in year 1887. Goodwin immediately sold his idea to American entrepreneur George Eastman. If you remember, in the last video we talked about George Eastman and how he popularized photography to the general masses. Now, when this idea was sold to George Eastman, he began the mass production of celluloid roll film on international scale from 1888 onwards. Now, both men, be that Hannibal Goodwin or George Eastman, they were solely interested in still photography. Basically, they were not looking at it in terms of motion picture or cinema. But later on, when the plastic recording medium was introduced, along with the technical breakthrough of Edward Mybridge and Ethel Jones Murray, it basically enabled inventors like Edison and the Edison Laboratory in Manlon Park in New Jersey in 1889 to invent the kinetograph. Now, this kinetograph is basically the first true motion picture camera. Now, like his predecessor, even Thomas Alva Edison or Thomas Edison was not interested in cinematography at all. Rather, he wished to provide a visual accompaniment to his vast, successful phonograph. Here, there is an interesting point to remember that anybody so far, be that Edward Mybridge, Etienne Jules Murray, Hannibal Goodwin or George Eastman, none of them were interested in the moving pictures. All of them were interested in still photography, and as far as Edison is concerned, he was interested in phonograph. In 1888, Edison commissioned a young laboratory assistant named William Kennedy Laurie Dixon. Now, remember this name because he is one of the most important people in the history of cinema. You can remember him or you can remember his name as Dixon only. Now, William Kennedy Laurie Dixon was hired by Thomas Alva Edison as a laboratory assistant and assigned him the task to develop a motion picture camera. William Kennedy Laurie Dixon invented the first motion picture camera in a brilliant synthesis of already existing principles and techniques which he had learned from the studies of Edward Mybridge or Etienne Jules Murray and others also. Now, to make the first motion picture camera, William Kennedy Laurie Dixon, as I said, studied about all the experiments of Edward Mybridge and Ethel Jules Murray and Hannibal Goodwin. He tried to understand the model and the mechanical simultaneously, and also after some effective attempts to record the photographic image microscopically on the photographic cylinder itself, William Kennedy Laurie Dixon actually began experimenting with the celluloid roll film in a battery-driven camera similar to conophotographic gun by Etienne Jules Murray. And what he invented was called the kinetograph, a motion picture camera with the fast intermittent at a speed up to 46 frames per second. As I said that he used the celluloid roll film for the same, but it was technically non-existent at that point of time in the desired form. So William Kennedy Laurie Dixon actually collaborated with Eastman Company for the practical celluloid film which he could use for his invention. So from 99 mm which he used for the working prototype, he finally decided on 35 mm film and used it for the final unveiling in the year 1893. Now this kinetoscope was actually a peep show machine for one person at a time only. It had prefixed loop of physical film, and the kinetoscope kept on showing this continuous loop which created an illusion of movement by the movement of the perforated physical film. In terms of legal documentation, as Edison already filed 2 claims and later 2 more, so total 4 in number of the concept kinetoscope, and the change in the design also, which was known as caveat. He did it in the year 1889 and a second round much before hiring the Dixon. Now, Thomas Alva Edison took the intellectual credit of inventing the kinetoscope by leaving William Kennedy Laurie Dixon and his team of inventors empty-handed. As long as he was alive, he never got the due credit of his valuable contribution of making the first practical modern motion picture camera. Thomas Alva Edison took the intellectual credit of his employer's work for decades, and he eulogized himself as the inventor of motion picture camera, but it was William Kennedy Laurie Dixon who actually invented the first motion picture camera. But there was a film historian by the name of Gordon Hendricks who wrote a paper titled Edison Motion Picture Myth, printed in 1961 from the University of California Press. And in this paper, Gordon Hendricks actually proved that the rightful owner of the invention of kinetograph was William Kennedy Laurie Dixon. And after the release of this paper till date, nobody has doubted the credentials of this paper. Now, like his predecessors, even Thomas Alva Edison was also of the belief that the future of the technology is not in its projection. He mistakenly believed that the future of the motion picture lies in the individual exhibition of the medium. Edison was on the line of the individual projection, an idea that suits better for the television industry, which is, actually the individual exhibition of pictures. He was rather interested in the combination of picture and sound. So he commissioned William Kennedy Laurie Dixon to perfect the machine related to sound and picture he had already designed for private use in his laboratory. True to the Edison vision, William Kennedy Laurie Dixon actually made both camera and sound machine, and the result was kinetoscope, phonokinetoscope, and kinetograph. There was an attempt to create sound film system by attaching phonokinetoscope with kinetoscope in 1893 by Thomas Alva Edison and William Kennedy Laurie Dixon. The point which needs to be clearly understood here is that it was not an attempt for simultaneous sound and the films shot for kinetoscope were silent films only. Just the different types of musical cylinders were offered in the form of phonokinetoscope, if played simultaneously, offered almost a rhythmic match. So, for one silent film, there could be many pieces of music which could very well, complement the visuals that people were seeing in the kinetoscope. The first motion picture studio, the Black Maria, a small, cramped, uncomfortable studio, had been constructed by Dixon in 1893 on Edison Laboratory ground at West Orange in New Jersey. If you remember that I have just said that as far as the legality of the kinetograph's idea is concerned, Thomas Alva Edison took at least 4 caveats related to the product. But when it came to the applying for a patent for his product, Thomas Alva Edison took the patent of his machine in 1891 only for his own geography, which means only for America, believing that it would be a non-commercial venture. So the validity of the patent was only in the geographic boundaries of USA. Like his predecessors, Thomas Alva Edison was of the belief that it would not catch the imagination of people and it would only be for non-commercial activity. Now, the cost of this patent covering the entire world for the machine was only $150 more what Thomas Alva Edison paid for securing the geographic boundaries rights of USA for his machine. It was only this $150 which initiated such a big change outside USA, and the idea of kinetoscope both were copyright free everywhere else in the world. Outside America, people were legally allowed to make changes or experiment with kinetoscope. It was available for everyone. Had that $150 been paid, no one could have experimented with kinetoscope anywhere in the world. Even Lumire Brothers experimented with this machine, and it became instrumental in developing the cinematograph also. The idea of combining sound with the image was always there, even in silent era too. The technological advancements in the radio technology and radio broadcasting were on the go also. By the year 1907, the first permanent transatlantic wireless service was also established. In 1909, Guglielmo Marconi and Carl Ferdinand Braun got the Nobel Prize for developing wireless daily telegraph. In the same year, which means that in 1909, we also had the first broadcast in the world from St. George, California, USA. By this year, by the year 1990, we have the first clear transmission of human voice, and regular broadcasting started in year 1920. On August 6, 1926, Warner Brothers from Don Juan had a synchronized musical score and sound effect. The Jazz Singer, another Warner Brothers film released in 1927, officially ended the silent era. This feature film not only had synchronized music score and sound effect like Don Juan, but also had lip synchronous singing and dialogues in many of its sequences. It proved to be a commercial success, and in 1928, a complete talking film, The Light of New York, was released by Warner Brothers. So, Don Juan, Jazz Singer, and The Light of New York, all these three films were from Warner Brothers. Now, there is an interesting development here that on April 14, 1894, a Canadian entrepreneur named Andrew Holland opened the first kinetoscope parlor in a converted shoe store in 1155 Broadway in New York City. Holland charged 25 cents per person for accessing to a row of 5 Edison peep shows views, each of which contained a single film loop shot with the kinetograph, and he became the first person in the history to make a living from the films. So as long as there was film roll in the camera and the performance was interesting enough, it was recorded. What we are discussing here is what happened earlier than the point that most of us know in the term in terms of history of film. Most of the general cinema history books starts from the introduction, like Lumire Brothers, Augustus and Louis Lumiere onwards. It was December 28, 1895, one of the most significant days in the history of mankind. It was the Saturday night when the cinema was born. Two French brothers, Auguste and Louis Lumiere, organized the paid public show at Café Capucine in Paris. It was the day when the projector threw rays which reflected on the screen. The actualities gave way to the dream-making industry, and here we are not just talking about machine, but the mindset also. Till these developments, what we are talking about, the photography was dominating. We had still images, and this point onwards, a new technology was at its starting point, which was in the business of creating an illusion of motion. It was about to start. Now, there is no alteration in the captured image in true sense. Obviously, you can manipulate it, or you can also decide to show a part of the truth, but it is not accepted in the court of law. So, to put it in simple words, when there is an image, you cannot edit it. Initially, it was the same psyche that got into motion picture also. After all, it was a series of still images that was to run on a certain speed. Because of this psyche, it was taken that the motion picture should not be edited. Why it should not be edited? Because the reality cannot be edited. So the other limitation was the weight of the kinetoscope also. So it was in the nature of the machine that it should not be moved. So the performance or act which comes to the camera, and it is not the camera which will go to places or performances. What was the basic difference between kinetoscope and the cinematograph? Well, the difference was that the machine, which was developed by Lumire Brothers, it was recording the events wherever the event was happening. It was lightweight and it was quite convenient for the operation, for operating and moving also. Even though cinematograph was quite lightweight as compared to the kinetoscope, even then it was only treated as unblinking human eye, as if you are seeing an event happening in front of your eyes only, and you are just there to witness it. So the camera was just a mere observer and the instrument of recording that was happening in front of it. The cinematograph was not only just the lightweight camera as compared to the kinetoscope, it was a recorder, a projector, and it was also convenient to develop the film for developing the film roll also, as it was quite convenient for taking out. So it removed the limitation of bringing the event to the studio, as was the case with kinetoscope and studio Maria. Things were coming to Studio Maria. Now, this new camera was capable of going to places and it recorded the incident as it is. The earlier films of Lumire Brothers were called actualities. In this series, which is basically video number 19, an entire video, the video number 13 actually is dedicated to the topic of documentary. There we will be discussing actualities at great length and also discuss about how actualities gave birth to documentaries. The coming of cinematograph proved to be an end of technological experimentation towards the final form of motion picture machine. Lots of development related to the improvement of camera kept on happening in the background, but the camera had been found. Now, it was not only the Lumire brothers who were successful achieving the workable motion picture camera. I mean, there were other brothers like Skladonovsky brothers, Max and Emily Skladonovsky from Germany demonstrated at a public show the self-invented film projector, the Bioscope, on 1st November 1895 at Wintergarten Music Hall in Berlin. Simultaneously in England, the inventor and the film director and producer Robert William Paul came up with the film projector theatrograph in year 1896. He called it animatograph also. Later on, George Méliès also bought this machine. He dominated his box office market, and the contribution of George William Paul is such that he is called the father of British film industry. He was also called Daddy Paul. At all these three machines, Lumire Brothers cinematograph, Sklandonovsky Brothers Bioscope, and Robert William Paul's theatrograph, started making money worldwide. Thomas Alva Edison became aware of it, and then he realized what kind of a mistake he has committed by not securing the patent for his kinetoscope worldwide. As the profit for the kinetoscope was on the decline, so Thomas Alva Edison saw a ray of hope in form of Thomas Arnott and his motion picture projection device, the phantoscope. As Thomas Arnott was introduced to Thomas Alva Edison by Ref and Gammon, he agreed to make a phantoscope, but with a condition, the trick that he was best with. He projected the phantoscope as Edison's invention and called it Vitascope and gave it an exhibition on April 23rd, 1896. But after some time, he even discontinued the production and marketing of Vitascope and advertised his own projectoroscope instead. With all these turns and twists, the inventions and the projections mark the culmination of prehistory of world cinema. Now, if you talk about the beginning of film or filmmaking activity in India and its early efforts, the first name that comes to mind is of Mahadaya Gopal Patwardhan and his friend Madan Rao, Madhav Rao Pitale, and their show by the name of Shamvari Kharolika. The itinerant projectionist prepared painted multicolored glass slides and which was made of 7 programs of total 3 hours duration and were projected with a lens and 3 magic lanterns, which not only created the continuity but also the semblance of movement. The first show is said to be started as early as on 30th September 1892 and continued to exist even after the arrival of motion picture in India up till 1918. Now, as far as the arrival of cinema in India is concerned, when you read books which deal with the topic like the history of cinema in India, you at times must have read that on 7th of July 1896 at Watson Hotel in Mumbai, Lumire Brothers showed 6 films. You must have come across this point while initially reading about these books. Unfortunately, there is a factual mistake here which need to be corrected in some of the books. The fact is, Lumire Brothers never came to India. I happened to attend a seminar some time back where a senior film critic said, that how Lumire Brothers came to India and how later on one of the Lumire Brothers was abducted by Japanese because they wanted to stay ahead in the race of technological invention. All these stories are just not true as far as India is concerned. When Lumire Brothers started making these actualities in Paris at that point of time, they also created a group of enthusiastic people and trained them in filmmaking. And these people, these trained people, actually traveled to different part of the world for showcasing these actualities and not only earning from these countries but also shooting tropical films of these countries and sending all these films back to Lumire Brothers in Paris, and Lumire Brothers were creating a reservoir or repository of diverse film stock for further sale. It is in this connection that Marius Cesar, an enthusiast and trained by Lumire Brothers or Lumire Brothers assistant who was on his way to Australia, took a halt in Bombay, and this is how on 7th July 1896 at the Watson Hotel, 6 films were shown in India. So there is no doubt that our first experience was of Lumire films only, but Lumire Brothers never came to India, and it was through Marius Cesar we got to see these 6 films in India. In the next year, which is basically 1897, he showed the same film in Calcutta also. Among many Indians who happened to see these 6 films, Harishchandra Sakaram Bhatvadekar, popularly known as Bhatvadekar or Save Dada, a portrait photographer by profession, after seeing these films, he bought a film camera and a projector from London, made few, day-to-day film on daily events, and also shot a film on wrestling in Hanging Garden, Bombay between 1897 to 1899. Hiralal Sen of Calcutta brought first camera for cinematography, shot at different places and showed these films to commoners. In 1901, Bhatvadekar recorded the arrival of R.P. Paranjpe returning from Cambridge, which was renamed as Return of Wrangler Paranjpe. 1902. According to many people from the field, some consider it as the first documentary in India, which is technically much before Robert Flaherty's Moana, which was 1926. We will talk about documentary and other aspects related to documentary film in video number 13, which is completely dedicated to this topic only. So in 1903, Bhatvadekar filmed Delhi Darbar of Lord Curzon. Another stalwart personality, F Madan, in 1902 launched his bioscope company, Elphinstone Bioscope Company, and started the production and exhibition of silent films in India also. He, by the end of second decade of the last century, not only turned his film production company into a joint stock company, but also captured half of the India's box office collection through his 127 cinema halls across India and nearby countries. His films were known for technical brilliance, and it was the only company at that point of time which could afford the foreign technicians for the production and excellence of Indian films. From 1901 to 1907, Abdul Ali and Yusuf Ali showed foreign films on their bioscope. And now let's talk about R.G. Torne and Gundi Raj Govind Palke, whom we popularly known as Dada Sahab Phalke. As many of the film historians would agree that the feature film production in India began with R.G. Torne's Puntlik. This is what many people believe, you know. So till this time, there was no effort to make a full-length feature film. Nana Bhai Govind Chitre and Ramchandra Gopal Tone or Dada Sahab Tone together attempted a film shooting outdoor in the garden in Bombay. Pundlik, which was released on May 18, 1912, with a Hollywood silent film, Dead Man's Child, in Coronation Cinematograph in Girgaon, Bombay, which actually Chitre owned. The film was 1,500 feet long and its duration was 22 minutes. The film was developed and printed in London, and as you now know that it was released on May 18, 1912 as the first part of the double program at the Coronation Theatre. Simultaneously, a film called Savitri, which was shot by Pathankar and Divakar. Unfortunately, it got damaged in the print in the processes 1911, and another, which is basically the third attempt, a short film dealing with Rama killing the Ravana, was also attempted but also got lost or destroyed. So be it Savitri by Pathankar and Divakar or Puntlik by R.G. Torne and the short film on Rama killing the Ravana, all these films actually preceded Dada Sahab Phalke's Raja Harishchandra, which was released in the Coronation Theatre, Bombay on May 13, 1913, which became the first feature film of India. In 1910, Gundiraj Govind Phalke saw Viet Pension de Christ or Life of Christ. So amazed and inspired by the film, Dada Sahab Phalke was convinced for making the first indigenous film. After gathering sufficient information and fund, so on 1st Feb 1912, he sailed to England to purchase the necessary equipment and to brush up his technical aspects of the filmmaking. He came back after the procurement of necessary equipment and basic training and started the production of Raja Harishchandra in the year 1912. Dada Sahab Phalke's Raja Harishchandra was released in the Coronation Theatre, Bombay on May 13, 1913. Another important development after the release of Raja Harishchandra in 1913 was Indian Cinematography Act of 1918, and Bhaktivide became the first film to be banned in India. It was directed by Kanjibai Rathore and was a Kohinoor Film Company production, though the film was based on Mahabharata and the characters and the character of Vidur, but the satirical resemblance of Vidur with Gandhiji wearing Gandhi topi and Khaddar, and it is also interesting to know that the film was released after the Rowlatt Act, the act which gave power to police to arrest anyone without any reason whatsoever. More than the attire and Gandhi-like portrayal, it was the contemporary references of the film which raised the eyebrow of British government towards this film, and in year 1921, Bhaktivide becomes the first film to be banned in Madras, Karachi and some other province under Indian Cinematography Act of 1918 in India. This act was designed to control the cinematographic exhibition of the film, which according to British government were found inappropriate and objectionable for the presentation to the public. This act was later on replaced by the Cinematography Act of 1952. Neel Akasher Niche, a film by Mrinal Sen, which was made in year 1959, is the first film banned in independent India. Another film, though it was not banned like Bhaktivide in India, which was released in 1921 prior to this film, there was another film which actually attracted the censor board's scissors. It was Sirenhiri, a film by Baburao Painter, or whom we popularly known as Baburao Painter, for almost a realistic representation of slaying of Kichak by Bhim. After Dadasaheb Phalke and Baburao Painter, it was Jamshedji Faramji Madan, or popularly known as J.F. Madan, who commanded the same respect like the first two. So, Dadasaheb, Baburao and Madan are the three gods of early Indian cinema. In 1902, J.F. Madan started showing, foreign films by organizing bioscope shows in tents in Calcutta, and by 1907 established his first permanent cinema hall in the name of Elphinstone Picture Palace in Calcutta. He also became an agent of Parthiv Film in India and later on turned himself in film production activities. When he decided to turn his attention to filmmaking, he converted one of his stage hits, Harishchandra, which ran for 500 hit shows, into a film and released in year 1917. As he had a strong background of theatre and later on he owned some of them also, it was natural for him to be in contact with best performers and best creative people of his time. One of them was Gohar Jan and the other was Aga Khan Kashmiri, the famous Urdu language playwright by his side. He was the first to float a public company related to film, and his chain of theatres reached to nearby countries also. He is the one who is first, or maybe the only one, who was able to manage his films not only horizontally but vertically also, which technically predates the Hollywood studio system. If not predates, then almost simultaneously for sure. To raise the standard of Indian film production, he hired many foreign and Indian technicians and enjoyed unprecedented position in the history of Indian cinema. At the peak of his popularity, his company was able to churn out 7 to 10 films annually, and his position in markets also invited severe criticism towards him. After the death of J.F. Madan, his son J.J. Madan, one among the 5 sons, took over and was the first one to go for an international collaboration. By 1925, all their films were consumed by fire. So this father and son duo was at par with international standard, and the company became a role model for Indian film industry, which was highly unorganized industry at that point of time. Though much has not changed even today also. Today too we are not an organized film production country in the world. Now, no one can deny that if Dadasaheb Phalke laid the foundation of the full-length feature film in India, it was Baburao Painter who nurtured it aesthetically, and it was J.F. Madan and J.J. Madan who brought and provided the economical structure to our film industry. There were other lot of interesting thing happening between, but as there is so much about the history of Indian cinema, so there is a kind of a pressure to choose and to tell you and what not to tell you. So another milestone of our film industry is when Fatima Begum, the first female film producer of India, came up with her film Bulbul-e-Paristan in 1929. It was an important fact because it showcased that there were enough space for everyone in the creative domain even at that point of time among us. How many female film producer or directors we have today, which is almost after 90 years. The current figure actually can disappoint you. Now, J.J. Madan happened to see the jazz singer, the Warner Brothers film released in 1927 in one of his trips to US, and he wanted to bring these talkies to India, for which he actually started upgrading his cinema halls by installing the sound system in many of the cinema halls that he owned, and he also wanted to make the first talkie of the film, but unfortunately he was not the first one to do so. The man who made the first talkie of Indian cinema was Khan Bahadur Ardesher Irani, or Aka Ardesher Irani, who released Alamara, the first talkie film of India India on 14th March 1931 at Bombay's Majestic Cinema. The Alamara was already a popular and a hit play in theatre circles, so selecting it to be the first talkie of India was a safe choice. Actors like Master Bittal, Zubaida, Prithviraj Kapoor and Jilobai were roped in for the project. The song sung by Wazir Muhammad Khan, De De Khuda Ke Naam Pe, became the first song, and the music for the film was done by Munshi Zahir. Now, Adesh Irani got the idea of making this first film as talkie after seeing Showboat, a film in 1929, which was a semi-talkie from the US for sound. The Department of Sound was headed by Adesh Irani himself, and Tanar sound system was used. Keeping this project as a secret was the topmost priority of the entire cast and crew. So most of the filming was happening during the night time only. Not only Alamara is the first talkie feature film, it is important in many other contexts also. The kind of actors and performers we had, it brought up a kind of a tectonic shift in the nature of actors in India after this film onwards. Now, with the arrival of sound, the demand shifted from physical actors to speaking actors. It means that during the silent era, it was thought that an actor uses the body to perform, but with the arrival of sound, the dialogues came, and at that moment, you say dialogues, the language came in. You must be surprised to know that for lead female protagonist, the first choice of Adesh Irani was Sulochana, or the real name is Ruby Myers. Do not get confused with the name. Her real name is basically Ruby Meyer, an Indian actress with Jewish ancestry. This ravishing and highest paid actress of the time was dropped from such an important project only on the basis of language, the Hindustani language, which is basically the mix of Hindi and Urdu. She was so heartbroken by this fact that she withdrew herself from the film industry for a year just to learn the language and made a commendable comeback, but she could not be the part of the first Indian talkie. That's the fact. Adeshir Irani again has the credit of producing first color film Kisan Kanya, which was released in the year 1937, and this film was directed by Moti B. Gidwani. Now, Neecha Nagar, which was released in 1946, a film which was directed by Chetan Anand, became the first film to get Palme d'Or at Cannes Film Festival immediately 1 year after we got our independence, which means by 1 year, which means by 1948 the film division was established. We will talk about film division, how it was formed in the video where we will talk or discuss about documentary at length. This reminds me that I was talking about Alamara and how Sulochana was dropped out of the project. There were many actors like Sulochana, or I may say Ruby Meyer, who faced a lull or slump in their professional career, as many of them were not able to cope up with this new situation. Many of them just could not adopt the situation. There were many directors who could not or did not want to shift to talkies. For many of them, talking would kill the meaning and aesthetics of cinema. The new breed of actors were required, actors who could speak the Hindustani Zaban, which was understood by people. So this new shift resulted in the absorption of actors from theatre, as they were very good with delivering the dialogue part. So switching from theatre to film, for them it was not it was easy for them. So many of the studios like Phalke Films, Alphystone Bioscope Company, Madan Theatre Limited, Maharashtra Film Company, Indo-British Film Company, Lotus Film Company, National Film Company, Kohinoor Film Company, United Pictures, Sharda Film Company, Ranjit Film Company, Associated Film, General Picture Corporation, and many more in the silent era. These were the companies, and some of the studios which became active till 1945. 1950, or we can say up till one or two, up till 1955 were Bombay Talkies, Sagar Movie Tones, Prabhat Studios, Neo Theatre, Vadia Movie Tones, Minerva Movie Tone, Kardar Production, Raj Kamal Kala Mandir, and some others actually enjoyed a very comfortable position during their time, which is studio era. But this studio era, ended by the time 1945 to 1950. Majority of the studios were collapsed, and after the independence, with many studios being at the last fag, either they were marginalized or they shut down. There were many reasons for this, for shutting down the studios. It would take another 1 hour video to explain it even briefly. Well, what happened with the collapse of these studios in India? This collapse of studio gave way to the rise of stars in India. Do you know any actor from the studio system era? Many of us do not. But many of us do know about Raj Kapoor, Devanand, Dilip Kumar, Madhubala, Nargis, Wahida Rahman, and so on. Who were they? All the names that I have just told you comes from the collapse of studio system. Now, the films were not known by the name of director or production company. They were now Raj Kapoor's film, or Devanand's film, or Dharmendra film, or Amitabh Bachchan's film, or for that matter Govinda's film, which in a long term actually resulted in the spiraling production cost, and thus it increased the risk also. Now, as the studios were collapsing in the middle of the last century, it gave birth to independent distributors who followed and survived on minimum guarantee mode. But believing too much on the star power and the escalating production cost of film increased the risk so much that producer and distributors were becoming bankrupt with only one flop film. Only actors were secure who were receiving the exorbitant price, and this too in maximum in cash form, crippled the entire economical structure of the filmmaking in India. And entity like distributor were, they were forced to adopt fixed commission mode for survival in coming decades, as they were bearing the brunt of the huge losses for a long time. As you know, that film division was established by 1948, and by 1951 Central Board of Film Certification CBFC was established by January 15, 1951. In 1952, Film Division organized the first International Film Festival in Bombay, and later on it was taken to 4 major cities, and this international festival left a positive influence on Indian film industry. Not only the filmmakers but the Indian viewers got the chance to see films from different countries and of different directors under one roof. The presence of Italian neorealism films and the direct influence of it on our filmmaker is a well-known fact. Films like Jaagte Raho, Boot Polish, Do Biga Zameen were some of the direct result of this influence. It not only gave a sensitive direction to film industry, to our film industry, but also laid foundation for many film societies and movements yet to come. Frank Capra was here in this festival. In 1954, National Film Awards were started. Now, this first International Film Festival proved to be a kind of a boon for Indian commercial film. It is not the case that Indian films or Indian filmmakers were not making films which were socially concerned film. If you look at Pather Panchali, which was released in 1955, a film directed by Satyajit Ray, not only became a critically acclaimed film, but also received many national and international awards throughout the world. Rather, it was the film which gave a new direction to international filmmaking community. This film won 11 international awards and Best Human Documentary Award at Cannes Film Festival in 1956. In the same year, which means 1955, Children Film Society of India, CFSI, was established, and its headquarters is there in Mumbai. In the same year, 1955, Directorate of Advertising and Visual Publicity, DAVP, was also established with a regional office in Guwahati and Bangalore, and two regional distribution units at Kolkata and Chennai. Its headquarters is in Delhi. We can forget, how can we forget Mother India, which was released in 1957, which was directed by Mehboob Khan. It is a film which is, our cultural classic, and it won many national and international awards like All India Certificate of Merit for Best Feature Film, Filmfare Best Film Award, Filmfare, and Best Director for Mehboob Khan. It also nominated for Academy Award for Best International Feature Film, and thus it became the first Indian film to be nominated for Oscars. Another landmark and one of my favorite and Guru Dutt's last film as a director was film Kagas Kapoor, which was released in 1959, which was written by Akbar Alvi. Guru Dutt was the producer, director and actor of the film. When it was released, it proved to be a financial disaster for Guru Dutt. People, realized the worth of this film years later, and later on Kagas Kapoor became a cult classic for us. When you watch this film, you see nothing but layering, be it in the work of M.R. Achrekhar's art direction, or the legendary cinematographer V.K. Murthy, iconic lighting, or even the song Waqt Ne Kiya Kya Hasi Sitam, which was sung by none other than Geeta Dutt herself. If you know the background, it's an irony. You must have, witnessed that in our film industry, the dream projects of directors and producers has often proved to be a financial disaster. Be that Mera Naam Joker or Kagas Kapoor and many more. But the film that I'm going to talk about, now, it was a maddening process for its director, a financial burden, and more than 1.5 decade almost in making. Yes, I'm talking about Mongliasm, directed by K. Asif and released in the year 1960. There is so much to talk about this film. There are so many stories related to this film. We can talk whole day about this film. This timeless film, which was the highest grossing film of its time and remains so for next 1.5 decade more, is second to none. When it was thought of choosing a black and white film to digital coloring, the Mongliasm was chosen, and the color version of it was released in November 2004. Like Kagas Kapoor, it's a must watch. It was the year 1960 when FTI, the Film and Television Institute of India, was established in Pune in the premise of Prabhat Studios. Another premier institute, the AJK Mass Communication Research Center, was founded in 1982 by Anwar Jamal Kidwai in collaboration with York University, Toronto, and Canadian International Development Aid Agency in the premise of Jamia Millia Islamia in New Delhi. We are living in a time when even the multi-starrer films are not able to hold the attention of audience with all the gimmicks possible. Yet the film Yadein, which was released in 1964, was produced, directed and acted by Sunil Dutt, which was written by Akhtarul Imam, is in the Guinness Book of World Record for being the fewest actor. In case of this film, only Sunil Dutt was there. In a narrative film, the film is a soliloquy of a man. In 1967, Around the World became the first Indian film to be released in 70mm, which was directed by Pachi. It would not be difficult to define the beginning of new new wave in Indian cinema, but many consider it with the Mrinal Sen, Bhavain Shom, and which was released in 1969, and Mani Calls Uski Roti 1969. Though it started with films by Satyajit Ray, Mrinal Sen, Tapan Sinha and Ritvik Ghatak, and with Mrinal Sen and Manikal, the other directors like Shyam Benegal, Kamal Swaroop, Govind Nihlani, Saeed Akhtar Mirza, Kumar Shahani, MS Satyu, Girish Kasarwali, Girish Karnad, BV Karnath, and many more. In 60s, 70s, and 80s, all of them were, offered new grammar and ideologies through their film. Parallel to this, the angry young man image was also constructed. The iconic film Sholay was released in 1975. Every character of this film is memorable and iconic. The brilliant dialogues by Salim Javed and all those situations, it kills it all. Though it was not a successful film during its first week of release, but positive word of mouth actually made the film as we know it today. Bhanu Athaiya became the first Indian to get an Oscar for Best Costume Design for 1982 film Gandhi, which was directed by Richard Attenborough. She won this award with John Molo. Now, this film called My Dear Kutti Chathan, a 1984 Malayalam film, which was directed by Jijo Punnosse, is the first 3D film of India. The Hindi version of it, Chota Chetan, was released in 1998. The next film in the row has many titles like Pushpak or Pushpak Vimana and many more titles state-wise. And it's the first modern silent film which was released in 1987. Now, the next significant film in the list is Salaam Bombay, which was our second entry to Academy Award, and it won Camera d'Or and Audience Award at Cannes Film Festival, and it also won National Film Award for Best Feature Film and many more. It was released in year 1988 and was directed by Meera Nair. In 1992, legendary filmmaker Satyajit Ray received Honorary Academy Award, the only Indian to do so. He made total 36 films of all kind, feature, documentary and short films. Satyajit Ray won 6 Best Director National Awards and total 32 national awards from Government of India, Legion of Honor in 1987 and the Honorary Doctorate from Oxford. Post-1990 or post-liberalization era, there was a shift in the kind of films we were making. There was a new, projection of Indian values and Indian diaspora. Written and directed by Suraj Barjatia, Hum Aapke Hain Kaun was released in 1994. It proved to be the highest grossing till then. It was a perfect entertainment and unifier for every Indian. Now, first multiplex in the form of PVR Anupam with 4 screens opened in Delhi in 1997, and our first in-short film was Tal, which was released in year 1999. Now, the industry status of Indian film industry was granted in year 2000, and RBI formulated the guidelines for the funding for the film industry. Now, Lagaan, which was released in 2001, which was directed by Ashutosh Gowarikar, was the third film to be nominated for Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film in 2002. The other two, the first was Mother India, which was released in 1957, and the other was Salaam Bombay, which was released in 1988, directed by Meera Nair. So, and we heard 100 Crore Club for the first time when Ghazni was released in 2008. This film was directed by A.R. Murugadas and was the highest grossing film of its time. In the same year, means 2008, Slumdog Millionaire was also released. In 2009, 3 Indians, A.R. Rahman, Rasool Pokuti and Gulzar got Oscars for this film. Though in academic domain and also in film fraternity, it faced its share of criticism for showing how they think about us and falsehood upon falsehood. And the last but very interesting fact which most of us do not know is that in year 2018 Vikas Sathye along with his team won the Scientific and Engineering Academy Award at the Oscar Scientific and Technical Award for creating the shot over K1 camera system. So, I have tried to cover from the very beginning to almost 2018, and I'm very sure that this video must have solved some of your queries related to the history of cinema, and the information provided in this video will come handy whenever you need it. In the next video, we will be learning about the history of radio. Till then, take care and stay safe.